This happened while I was in 11th grade. I'm a female, and I tend to be a bit of a people pleaser. I never like to call anyone out, reject anyone outright, or act like somebody is being weird. I'm also a bit open-minded, and I just tend to go with the flow. School had started in early September, and in my marine biology class, I noticed there was this boy that kept staring at me from the corner of my eye. I just made one of those half smiles towards him to acknowledge him and went on about my assignment. I really did not think much of it for a couple of weeks, even though he continued to stare. He was very skinny and tall, had brown hair, eyes that were so brown that they could have been black, and a generally nondescript face apart from his super dark eyes. One day he decided to say hi. I said hello back to him. He told me his name was Alex. I told him mine, but he said he already knew my name. That wasn't that much of a surprise to me, as I did have rather large handwriting, and he could have easily watched me write my name on my papers since he was staring at me so much. It was just kind of odd that he didn't really have any facial expression when he flatly said he knew my name. I just laughed a little and said, "Oh, okay," and began putting my things back in my bag as the bell was about to ring. I only had a few friends, and we usually sat at the same table during lunch. We were rather quiet, and most times we would just read while we ate. That means I don't usually look around the lunchroom, as I always had my eyes on my book. This day, my friend finished her novel, so I decided to put mine away and that we could just talk. I immediately noticed Alex staring at us from one of the courtyard tables. He never seemed to be embarrassed that I had noticed him. I showed him to my friend and told her about my classes with him. She found it to be super creepy, but I said he's probably harmless and just socially awkward. I arrived at marine biology a little early that day, and so it was just myself, Alex, and one other girl for about 10 minutes. I half smiled at Alex and then decided to break out my book and just start reading again. He had his hands up, folded over his mouth, and was staring again. At this time, it just felt awkward because we were pretty much alone now. I glanced over at him and kind of raised my eyebrows a little as if to say, "Yeah?" He looked me up and down very slowly, and I just asked if he was okay. He just flatly said yes, and that he was just inside of his head thinking about something. Okay, whatever, that's fine. The next day at lunch, there was a little piece of paper at my table that had my name on the front, but not just my first name, my first, last, and middle name. I opened it up, and it said something like,
"I wonder what your asshole would look like with a thick PVC pipe shoved up it."
What the fuck? I looked around but didn't see Alex, but I immediately knew it was him. I was very scared to come to class later that day, but he wasn't there. I felt a lot better about not seeing him. The note itself was really gross and embarrassing. I didn't want to show it to any administrators because of that. I just threw it out. I went to the bus area at the end of the day like usual, but this time I noticed Alex was leaning on one of the pillars with his backpack on one shoulder. I immediately felt chills down my spine when I noticed there was a white PVC pipe poking out of the top of his backpack through the zippers. I didn't give him any reaction to my knowledge of it, even though I'm sure he watched me reading the note. The next morning, I made an appointment with my counselor to have my classes changed. She was very reluctant to do this for me because we were already well over a month and a half into the school year, but I think since I have a history of good grades and behavior that she helped me out. I spent the rest of the year avidly avoiding him. He kept staring at me at lunchtime, and one time he took photos of me at the bus area without my consent. Even though it was against school policy, I brought some pepper spray for me for a while when I got off at my bus stop. I had no clue what happened to him because when 12th grade began, I didn't see him again. I'm not sure I even want to know what happened to him. So, creepy kid with a pipe fetish, let's not meet again, ever. For background and reference, I'm a 17-year-old male living in California. This happened about 2 days ago. I was on vacation in a cabin at Tahoe. My parents had left for the beach at around 5:30 p.m. They didn't take me because I had recently gotten piercings and they didn't want them to get infected or something like that, and I found that they wouldn't be back until around 11:30. So I was at the house alone until like 5:30. The cabin is part of a complex of cabins that stretch over a half a mile. Each cabin was separated by around 400 meters, and there were only like 5 to 6 cabins in the complex. It was a small 2-room cabin with a bathroom and a nice box television that miraculously picked up on some of the decent stations, as in like all the other stations besides the really obscure and ragtag local news networks. You know what I'm talking about. So I was pretty much just sitting around drawing. I was drawing butts, not like how a 3-year-old who is bored and just doodles random stuff on his paper kind of thing, more like how a 17-year-old decently talented artist would do it. Sorry, it's kind of a long story. At about 9:50ish, I started hearing shuffling and thunking noises in the back of the cabin where the boiler room was. To put it into a bit of perspective, the cabin had its boiler in this little closet that can only be accessed outside of the cabin. It's not big enough for anybody to stand inside, and apparently it didn't have a lock because there wasn't any reason anyone would want to break into it anyways. I initially just wrote it off as the boiler making thunking sounds, which it normally does a few minutes after when people take a shower. But nobody has taken a shower recently, and it continued to happen. When people shower, the thunking only happens for like a minute and a half tops afterwards. These noises went on for 10 minutes before I realized something was definitely wrong. Now, normally I'm a person to freeze up in fear at something, but strangely enough, this didn't happen this time. I guess, to try and explain this, I normally freeze up when I think I hear stuff when I'm home alone. But when I actually know something is amiss, like somebody's breaking in or something, and when I'm not unsure about it, I'm not as scared for some reason. It's more the fear of the possibility of something being there than something actually being there. Here's an example to try and make sense of this. I have a huge fear of deep, murky water, kind of like the ocean. It's because you can't see what's down there. The same goes for unlit but open garages at night. You don't know if somebody is standing there watching you pass. Does that make sense? Probably not, but I digress. I had assumed it was somebody messing around back there in the boiler room. Somebody as in a person, mind you. A pretty bad assumption to make in retrospect because my dad saw a 600-ish pound black bear messing around back there the other day. So here's another weird thing about me. I have a collection of masks, and I bring a mask on every vacation. This time I brought the mask of Wolf from the video game Payday. I don't know, just in case I needed it, This time it actually did come in handy. I decided to put the wolf mask on, and I took my shirt off and I had a pair of jeans on. In retrospect, as I took a picture to send to a friend of what I looked like, my fly was down. I'm not entirely sure that added to the intimidation factor or not. I brought my butterfly knife as well. I always keep it with me, even places that it's not legal. Well, technically it's a bottle opener if anybody asks, but it's made to be like a butterfly knife, and I also sharpened it, so it would really hurt if you were to be stabbed by it. Now, before we continue, I'm known for making really dumb judgment calls without any thinking. Just completely impulsive decisions. But, for the most part, they've worked out. My friend says I'm gonna get killed someday. Was it really smart to step outside when I heard all these noises and assumed there was somebody out there potentially wielding a large-ass knife or a gun to blow me away? Because hey, AR-15s are pretty easy to come by, right? I'll let you decide. I guess I just wanted to establish myself as the dominant presence to this guy and let him know that I wasn't scared. That I was the one in control here. Anyhow, I opened the door really quietly and stepped outside. It was pitch black outside, apart from the moonlight. I was trying to be stealthy, moving on my heels like in all those How to Be a Ninja WikiHow guides, but I stepped on a twig, cliche as it sounds. As soon as I did, the rustling around in the back in the boiler room stopped. I didn't hear any movement from him, so I took 2 giant steps towards the boiler room. On the first step, I heard him move. Presumably, he was backing away from the boiler room, as on the second step, I saw him as I rounded the corner. He was about 10 feet away from me, dressed in a black sweatshirt with the hood on so I couldn't see any of his features, dark blue jeans, and he had a wrench clenched in his hand. I think it was a wrench. I hope to God it was a wrench. It was pretty hard to see. He never made a single sound apart from breathing. It was so quiet I could actually hear him breathing. It wasn't even heavy, either. It was just normal breathing. We stopped and stared at each other for like 30 seconds, and no, it didn't feel like an eternity, it just felt like 30 seconds, and none of us said anything. I had assumed somewhat of a fighting stance. In retrospect, the pose wasn't really that threatening, but the knife, mask, and lack of shirt probably upped the intimidation factor of it. In terms of fight or flight, surprisingly I fought. At least I was fully prepared to, if it came down to it. I took a large step towards him, hoping he would run off and not fight. Luckily, that was just the case. He got the hell out of Dodge, and I tore ass back to the cabin, locking and relocking all the doors. I'd like to say this wasn't the end of it, and he came back with a vengeance, but nope, that was the last I ever saw of him. I know he wasn't a mechanic, because nobody had called us to inform us that somebody was coming over, and he sure as hell wasn't dressed like one. And we didn't get a call from management later saying, so, I think your son chased off our mechanic with a knife? What was that all about? So the real question was, if he wasn't a mechanic, then what the hell was he trying to do back there? Poisoning the water? Siphoning it out for himself? I mean, we are in a drought after all, and everybody loves to make that joke around here. And I've heard news of people stealing water before around here, so anyways, creepy dude messing around with our water heater at like 10 p.m. Let's not meet again.